All right, facilities.
Facilities Council met. We will have not addressed the first bullet on your agenda in regards to the rental agreement. That will be a November topic. We did meet with the Facilities Council as well as with the district manager from Aramark and Dennis Kasserag to review the $60,000 reduction that was scheduled for last year. It really came out to be about $41,000, if I'm correct, Tim, it's about 41.
Yes.
And we just want some clarification how that reduction occurred and the thought process behind it. Although the budgeted reduction was for $60,000, it really is an actual budget reduction of about 41 because in their contract they have an automatic CPI increase. We then wanted to go into the services that were eliminated or cut, and basically after reviewing with the district manager and with Dennis and the advisory council, we're pretty much receiving pretty closely the similar services we were receiving at the contract rate under the last contract rate, even though there was a $41,000 reduction in payment to Aramark. Their staffing decreased a little more than what the actual percentage of decrease to the contract was. Their staffing decreased a little more, but they also have seniority lists and stuff that they had to account to. So basically, we're getting more, or we're getting the same amount, maybe slightly less, from Aramark, but at a $41,000 less rate. Is that advisory council? Do you want to touch on that at all, or does that sound pretty accurate to what we came to the conclusion of at that meeting?
To phrase it differently, they let go of the lower wage individuals.
Right.
That was the majority of the hours. That's why the hours appeared larger than the total cut.
But they
But
agreed to maintain the service.
they agreed to maintain the service
level.
because the more experienced people theoretically should do more.
So it was a pretty good break there. In regards to the boilers, you all received the weekly notification. The boilers are up and running. That install and service came last week. However, we're not going to write any letters or have our attorneys pull off on anything until we get through an actual month or two of cold weather to make sure they operate under significantly low temperatures. But we had inspectors from Camus, 2010 Engineering, and Johnson Controls come out and set everything and look at it. I reviewed it with Dennis. Dr. Keene came out Monday, also walked through with us the changes. The same thing with the pool ventilation. That has been fixed. I was myself on the roof on Friday with the technician from Soresco reviewing the changes and what occurred. He, as I stated in the weekly update, confirmed with me that we have more than enough ventilation power through that fan to ventilate that pool and circulate the pool. All the condensation has been gone. The temperature is at a regular temperature. And our air quality is much better in there now that we actually have some ventilation and airflow. So the one thing we would have to keep an eye on is, was there any problems that occurred because of all the condensation that was in there for the 2 or 3 weeks that it was non-functioning? And that would only be to be determined. We have to watch that closely. All of our outlets do have plastic covers on them. You would think your pool scoreboard and some of those things are made to deal with that type of condensation and humidity, but for 3 weeks with no exhaust fan running, I mean, we just have to wait and see what occurs. But once again, we walked the pool the other day. There wasn't any condensation anywhere, and the temperature was significantly balanced. So I think we're okay there. We will watch that closely as well. The last topic on this council that's been brought up a few times is the renovation and the construction project. And I know there's had been some discussion prior to my arrival in regards to a construction audit and the cost affiliated with the construction project and detailed reporting. So what I've included in your board packet are the spreadsheets that the district has on record that I believe Chris Welton was keeping during the construction project. This is the closest thing that we have to a summary of the construction project by line item or by account item. And then we have whatever's been mentioned in our annual audits that are required by the state. So I know there had been some questions on a more detailed accounting of that construction project, and I figured this would be a good time for that discussion to occur in regards to the Facilities Council, if anybody would like to touch on that.
Well, it's apparently been raised to two councils, right? First of all, right, to finance.
Yeah, Finance was looking at some of these spreadsheets and some of the files.
And apparently the finance group has got copies of documents, et cetera, and reviewed some of them.
They have reviewed some of the files in regards to the construction project.
They gave us access, I haven't sat and reviewed them all.
Okay. So, I don't know, John, do you want to encapsulate what the idea is behind doing an accounting, or do you? Because you were one of the people that, along with some other people, think that this is a worthwhile and important exercise, so.
See, this is what I mean. A board member brings up something we should investigate. Surely the administration didn't bring this forward. That's the purview of board members to ask.
Kevin, did you want to talk first about the rest of this, or?
Well, we have some general things that we talked about under facilities that we could see is obviously Chris's Excel spreadsheets. That will align with your notes of what you have there. We were going to talk with some other schools about what they receive. I have one example from Ridgewood right now that we were able to receive since the committee just met last week and we touched before the board packet went out. What they have is very similar to this Excel spreadsheet. I might go into a little more detail by contractor that performed work under a significant project where some of these aren't as detailed, but it's a very similar document. Tim, you were going to check with an audit firm on a general cost to conduct an audit?
Yeah, I checked with our current firm. They estimated about $15,000. It's kind of hard for them to come up with a really good number because they don't know exactly. They want to meet with the board and find out exactly what it is that you want them to do. I also contacted the previous auditing firm that I had worked with, a company by the name of Miller Cooper, and their estimate was $10,000–15,000. And that was just a description to go through 3 years of bills and change orders. And that type of thing.
The other thing is that from a school district standpoint, we're having a part-time CFO right now, and kind of having some big projects we're working on going forward. The facilities committee council talked a little bit about not using current staff to work on this matter because we're already working on enough projects going forward and some things that we need to get aligned. So,
Well, I'll address it then, unless John wants to, because it's come up 100 times. Apparently, there's people in the community who think that an accounting needs to be done and that one wasn't. Well, first of all, there was some type of accounting done, and I presume we can put the documents out on our webpage. It might not have the detail people want, but as I've said many times, I recall when they were starting, we were going to put an addition on, we were going to redo the field, do a gym, what do we call it here? A field house, redo the pool, put some new science labs in, and lo and behold, we redid the football field, there's a new pool, there's new labs, and whatever else we said we were going to do. I don't know if the pool originally was budgeted for $3 million and cost $5 million, or if it was $4 and cost $3. But we do have numbers showing that we started with a figure, we ended with a figure. So my thing is that, people said they want to do it, that's fine, but we're looking at ancient history here. The accounting wasn't done in such a manner that you can just pull reports off and redo it, so it would be a manual process. If we went to the outside, we'd spend $10,000 or $15,000. I don't think that's a good use of our resources. I think if this is something that people feel strongly about, and there's a couple board members who have mentioned it, they should take the bull by the horn, see if there's volunteers in the community, put the documents there, let them go nuts. I mean, whatever they think they're going to find, or however they're gonna break it down in some different manner, you know, that's fine, but, you know, we've got, as a board, in my mind, and more particularly, our staff and our administration have a lot more important things to do of going forward than to go through records and see, you know, whatever the people think they're going to find, that there's some discrepancies in these reports.
This was published in February 2010. It's not been out there at all?
Not that it's not on the
Nope.
website, is it?
No, hasn't been.
It is not. And if you look at these are the reports that I received when I was on the facilities committee, and you see the changes and how it varies by month, by month, by month, and surprises in there, especially the one where we're at 80,000 at the, moving towards the end of the project, $80,000 of debt. There were a lot of surprises to it.
Well, we don't know that there's surprises. There could be an explanation from, they held something back, or what they did in the project. And they bought a lot of things up front and then put it
Laura, I
in.
served on the facilities committee and was told that we were supposed to be break even or making $100,000. And then I walk into a meeting where it says we are $80,000 in the hole.
Okay,
We
but
also had an owner's rep that wrote items on the back of a piece of paper and did not have Excel spreadsheets. So when I walked into that meeting and was told that it's Chris Walton's fault, it's not the owner's rep's fault, I brought out the contract showing that it's the owner's rep that has to be, that is representing us to make sure it happened. So there were items out there that showed to me, one, that our owner's rep was not doing a great job, was not working to our ability. In fact, that we stopped paying her at the end of the project. And just, the key thing right now is you spend $66 million on a project that encompasses over 3-4 years. That originally was supposed to be a parking deck over here, that now it didn't happen, all that stuff like that. There wasn't any
No, a parking
explanation.
deck was never in the original plans.
That was additional, wasn't it?
That was
wasn't
additional, and research was done on it, and the cost for that was $10,000 a space, and we couldn't acquire the land.
So what I'm saying right now.
Rockefeller improvement, though,
Yeah.
right here.
Right. So the parking garage and the parking deck was never part of the original referendum, because it had to do with land acquisition that we could not acquire.
Well, let me ask this question. Tim, I was going to talk about this. I didn't.
I'm sorry, John.
No, I'm not going to blow it off. But I understand what you're saying. I understand your point. Here's one way to look at this. What's it going to cost us to run the referendum, direct costs? Is it going to cost us anything? I'm just a general question, Matt.
No.
Would it
doesn't
cost us
anything.
nothing?
spend money on it.
You don't spend any money to put it on the ballot. You're going to have some legal work. It's minimal of getting your ballot question right.
The school can't spend money,
Yeah.
actually.
The schools,
referendum itself.
the school's allowed to put out
Information.
neutral information.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Okay, what would that cost?
That costs what?
It has to be less than $3,000 or something, right?
well, I think the deal they got on the piece that they mailed out was somewhere in the $1,500 neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, here's one way to look at it. Eventually, I think everyone would agree we're going to have a referendum. Now, the goal, if we have that referendum, is we want it to pass. We don't want to do it twice. So if we look at what's the cost of having that referendum and having it fail versus having the referendum and having it pass the first time. By not addressing this, I know it would cost us 10 or 15 grand to have an outside person do this. It could be, you look at it this way, it's going to ensure that the next time we have a referendum, it's going to pass, because people are confident that any issues with the last one were addressed, or at least reported. So I think that's the way to look at spending this money. I think it'd be useful to see if we could have a sample of what we get for that 10 or 15 grand. You said you've got some rough proposals. I'd like to see what kind of report we're going to get. Is it something that's easily readable by the community and translated with a summary? And then perhaps see what they can produce for that 10 or 15, and then see maybe if people in the community can volunteer to produce the same type of document. But I think initially, I'd like to see one of these sample reports or audits from, as Tim mentioned, that we could get, and then go from there.
I'm going to ask, John, your indulgence just to look. I know we had documents, and I want to say I put them in a box, and in a paper box, and I put them in the attic. But I know we had budgets for this project. So let me look, see if I have any of those for you to look at, and if you still think an audit is
This
necessary.
isn't for me, this is for the community.
But if you don't think those documents are sufficient for the community to figure out what happened, then you might want to go through, because I want to say, I thought we had a budget, like, that looked almost like our annual budget for that project. I can't believe there's no documentation in the district office.
Well, I guess the point is, I'm telling you, just from campaigning and stuff,
Right.
people want to know what happened, and they don't. And I think it's our obligation to give it to them. And
What
I
about-
agree with Tim, I don't want to spend the money, but in the long run, maybe we need to.
Well, what about this? What if we had the finance council start, just to initially browse through? You got Mike here with that experience looking, you got Gary who knows what audits look like and what the key areas to look for. Just to do initial comb through to see if they see anything.
Well, I'd really like to see a document, someone who says they can produce something for 15 grand. I want to see a sample from some other place of what they produce. I'd like to see that.
And I'll reiterate, if there's people in the community that think this is important, I say, let's get volunteers.
Well,
I don't want Mary Ann making copies, I don't want Tim spending it, he works part-time. And, there's some people that feel very strongly about it, and they said they want to support the school, and this is important, and transparency. Why don't we just put something on the website? Who wants to volunteer to go through the records and help do a report on what it is? If
Well,
it's
I
important,
agree,
you step
Tim, I
forward.
totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, but I
But
want to
the-
see, let's see what a professional report looks like
Okay.
The
first.
problem you have is if you have people in the community is coming up and saying, I want to volunteer, who has experience in looking at construction, expenditures, revenue, and auditing and that stuff like that? Anybody can come up and say, I'm going to help, but if you give them that, they don't know what they're looking for.
Trained eyes.
Well,
Yeah.
my point is, I want to see a sample report. We're not deciding whether to
Right.
spend the money.
No, I agree with
Well,
you,
my
John.
question,
get the
how would we
report.
get an example report unless we put out an RFP or ask somebody to submit one?
Oh, they've got.
They've got it, they've got samples of them.
They said they can
It's like a
do it
drug
for
sample.
15 grand.
Tim, can you talk to your people?
They're gonna want direction in terms of exactly what you want them to do. I mean, just to say to come in and view records for a construction project that happened over a 3-year period doesn't really tell them what it is.
Or if they did it, tell them we want them to look at our old records and produce a report that is an audit of what the records say and whether, compared the budget to the actual and how everything worked out. Now, if they can do it, say they can do it for 15 grand, they should have done it something similar before. Give a redacted version of it or something.
Have we gone to McHugh, or
Yes.
we had a project manager, and they
Yes.
don't have those documents?
This is them.
District should have it.
These are the monthly accountings.
From McHugh?
This is the monthly accountings that the business manager at the time, working with McHugh and White, produced. I've contacted both White and McHugh, had a meeting with them.
Mhm.
They feel that all the change orders and all the
Mhm.
bills, all that was board approved by
Mhm.
public action,
They were?
that they have no reports that they need to generate for. So they were kind enough, they came and they pulled out, for example, maybe September of 2008.
Mhm.
That folder's, and I think some of the finance, we have seen them a little bit. Each folder's probably 4 to 6 inches thick of individual sheets of papers, bills from individual contractors, purchase supplies, change orders. And they're saying, well, if you can go through this and put that together with this, it's all there.
Mhm.
Well, we don't have the time to, or the personnel to say, by month, by individual invoices, by contractor, to try to find that in here.
And didn't Pat Summerall, didn't she should have kept every paper, right? Every
Sure,
change order.
so she
It's in
has
those
those
boxes?
boxes, but
Okay.
as I think the board president mentioned, I wasn't here, but I don't think her last payment was received because of
She was not,
discrepancy with performance.
yeah.
But for the first 3 years, I mean, she prepared a report, so we'll have to get those.
No, the reports came from McHugh, they did not come from the owner's rep. all the owners rep did at meetings that we sat there with was, I'm just gonna let you know, we're, got the moving company coming in at this certain amount of time to move out the school. I've talked to people like that. We did not get reports like this. As I told you before, in the meeting when we were short $100,000, all of a sudden we get hit with this, we're $100,000 deficit. She was reading off of written notes on the back of a piece of paper. There was no Excel spreadsheet.
Well, Matt, what's your general feeling about my proposal? Or how about, there has to be other owner reps around this country, instead of an auditing firm, maybe an owner's rep firm could in retrospect go back and give us something. Could we ask some owner reps firms for, get an idea from them? If they could produce something?
The key thing with this is it's such a big project, and it's so complicated because it's over a long period of time, that if you don't, you gotta bring people in that know about what to look for in an audit construction.
I agree, that's why I'm looking at different, I'm looking at all the alternatives here. You know, owner's reps, because it seems to me she didn't do her job. We should add some kind of report from her. The community deserved a report from her, but she didn't do the job.
Well, I think we need to be careful about saying that, because for 3 years, we received reports,
From McHugh.
and from Pat Summerall, who presented at every board meeting. So let me go in a box and see if I have those reports. So maybe I don't know what happened in the last year, I wasn't there, but I think we need to be very careful about making accusations in public that we can't.
I will tell you right now that anything that came to the board regarding the construction project was all change orders. There were change orders, this is, we want to release this amount of money from this fund, we're going to close out this contract.
Well, you were
Hey,
two on the
man.
board
So let me ask you a
times.
question.
What?
You two were on the boards at
Yeah,
different
but I
times.
caught it at the back end
And she
when we were
called
doing the major part of the construction.
No,
There were some
the major part.
reports that I found in a file cabinet, but then they stopped. They were like bounded reports, kind of
Right.
just like describing the progress of the
Right.
projects. And we had a few of those, but then after a certain point in time, Mary Ann and I could not find any more of those.
Okay.
You know, that, like from when it originally started, that maybe they were giving us a 3-month update
Right,
of
right.
this is done and this was. We don't have any that represents the accounting of this.
Okay.
Would it be reasonable to take possession of those individual invoices that,
They're here.
we have them? I thought Mrs. Summerall had them.
No, we have a box of all the individual
Everything.
invoices. And they, obviously, there are original documents, so they cannot leave school grounds, but if under the supervision of the administration or,
So we have
Somebody
everything.
could
on
review
the
those.
So my question to the
Okay.
finance council, finance advisory council is, do you think, one, that you guys could take a look at it, do just a preliminary, to see if there's anything that you feel could warrant going on forward with spending the money for that, or doing the call out to see if we have people that could help us with that? And I'm talking to Mike and Gary on this.
I think step one, we need to inventory what it is we actually have.
Okay.
From what I saw, Tim, there's 4 boxes, and each box has a stack of paper, whether it be 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, Kevin, that represents a check that the board approved to be paid. And attached to that is a lot of paper. And what exactly it represents, I'm not sure. But it represents subcontractors and all kinds of payments made to the general contractor who paid the subcontractors. So I think step one is to figure out how many of these reports we have, inventory that. How many of these actual boxes of checks and invoices we have. And we have to keep the originals, we have to keep the integrity of the originals. And one of the things that I suggested was we take some of those canceled checks and invoices and scan them in and preserve them that way, so that we certainly wouldn't let a room full of board members, let alone community members, rifling through the originals that, in my experience, would never get back to the exact way they were. So my suggestion is perhaps we PDF scan the documents in question, and maybe at a future date, the board says, well, let's post these to the website, or let's let's make these available to whatever decision the board makes as to who or when that they'll get looked at. And we, I guess at some point in time, Kevin, someone came and explained to you and Tim what those bills, what those boxes were and how they fit into the picture and how they worked. And we can get that knowledge and assemble the package for ultimately what the board wants to do with it. I kind of agree with John that somewhere out there, someone should have some kind of work experience in doing this, especially the people who said maybe it would cost this amount of money or that amount of money. So I think we really need to inventory what we have. And I think, Laura, if you're willing to go to the attic, you should get all the records you have, because one of the things I'd like to see is, what was the budget and what were we gonna buy for that?
Yeah,
And like the
Right.
auto shop, it's my understanding that the auto shop is a separate and apart from
Yes.
this building. So something had to be done to segregate that out from the referendum, which the referendum says was a modification of this building.
no, the monies came in two, it was like the first approval of one bond for that.
Yeah,
And
there's
so-
no separate bond for that.
Yeah.
If you got those documents, I or Gary or somebody be willing to put them in
Well,
a
that's-
good order and inventory them, so we see what we have to work with, and we move forward at that point.
Well, and to that vein, on a concurrent basis, I think we need to get the board actions along the way. When you see a 4%
Catchers.
excess of revenues that were spent, $2.6 million excess of what was originally projected, of 6.3 or 6.3.8, and wind up being 66.4, there had to be a board approval saying, we're going to spend the additional $2.6 million of revenue windfall that we received off of these bonds. And then the movement off of building renovations of 4.6 greater, but I can see there's some line items because I'm looking at architecture fees being 4.5 less. But you see furniture and fixtures originally budgeted for 400, and then us actually spent at 2.6 million. Those had to be board actions along the way. So I think equally important is that to put some of the public out there to realize that there were board actions that moved the money around, that did authorize the 2.6 of additional revenues that came in, were authorized in a public meeting, were approved, that monies were moved around from whatever. But I agree with you also, Mike, that it'd be great to have a picture of what was originally earmarked for the 44 million in building renovations and wound up being $49 million in building renovations.
Mike, are you suggesting, or would it even be possible if, even as board members, I would volunteer some time on a Saturday morning to come in, as you've mentioned, and make the PDF scans of some of those things so the originals could go back in the folder and you can organize those in a way that could be approved?
Can I touch on this for a minute? We copied 2 folders for the finance committee to begin, start looking through that, so that we had the originals back in there. We scanned 2.
Because we wanted to see if it was even possible with
Right.
the technology we had.
Mary Ann, almost 4 hours for 2 files, and there was over 30 just in one box, if I'm not, because I'm talking, by the time you unstaple them, then you gotta try to figure out how you put them back in, the scanner can only do it. We're talking time intensive.
Well,
So what I'm wondering is if it's not to pay an expenditure for an auditor, it might be, the board might say, let's pay an expenditure to bring in a retired secretary or clerical assistant that could help scan all these documents, instead of having different people volunteer and put, what I'm saying to you is if one piece of paper gets stapled to the wrong file, it's gonna cause,
Right.
it could cause a,
Or, in my experience, you're scanning with a copy machine, and a copy machine has a feeder that's traditionally 50 pages. is not what you want to be doing with these files.
True, because one of them could get, because some of them are original bills and.
You know, so you may want to talk to a vendor who has a scanner who can, you know, scanners can scan up to 4,000 pages an hour with 400 pages of feeding capacity.
Sure.
Whereas a copy machine has 25 to 50 pages, and, you know, so there may be some efficiencies in.
All right, so what I'm hearing right now is three things. One is, you're gonna look in your
I'll
attic,
get the
just make sure
boxes.
there's anything in it, you get it out of it, so. So that's number one. Number two, I hear from Mike, we should inventory what we have.
Who's
And
we?
Mike said that he needs to have an inventory of what paper we have for this project, reports, invoices.
I heard that, and I heard you say "we," and I'm very
do it.
adamant
No,
that I
I
do
was-
not support anybody who's currently on the payroll of Riverside Brookfield High School doing this work, because we have important work to go forward with.
Right.
Okay. That's
And
your
Mary Ann
opinion
always-
as one board member?
That is my opinion, so I want to make sure it's clear who the "we" is.
So
If you
Mike,
put it on a table, I'll inventory.
okay, so Mike will do that.
Well, Mike, do you need help? I mean, I'd be willing
No,
to
I don't need to
volunteer.
go in the attic, no.
No, but do you need help inventory?
Well, let's get it on a table, and, sure, if anyone wants to help inventory, that's,
Wake him up.
Well, you mentioned
Well,
like
the tree's not
hiring a firm, could we hire a firm to inventory? Like you said, maybe that's only like a couple $1,000s, and then we have all the information.
well, I think if you want to do anything to establish the integrity of the originals, you might want to pay somebody to scan these folders.
Right, so what, can we get an idea?
And then it's just a matter of going through, and it's, you know, it's a file like this represents one check number. You write down the amount and the check number, and they
Right.
probably can pull it out of the system already. All the checks that were posted to the construction is what these boxes represent. That's what the paper represents. It's a canceled check and all the backup that was approved by the board.
So my question is, who's gonna do that? Do we wanna bring somebody in to just do the scanning, and then the finance committee can take a look at it? Does the finance committee wanna do it? Does board members and finance committee? I don't know.
Well, I think a board member, as Tim mentioned, might want to look around to see if there's a company who can do that. Like Mike said, there might be places that you can give it to them and they could,
But you don't wanna lose your chain of custody, am I right, Gary?
Right.
You don't wanna lose your chain of custody.
Those are our documents, right?
There's firms that do it, and for different sizes and stuff is expensive, because
Yeah.
that specialize in it, like, because you do it for discovery and a lawsuit or
do.
whatever. I mean, you give them your originals, but it's not cheap.
So how do we wanna proceed on this?
The Finance Advisory Council's meeting in the near future, are we not?
Next week.
Okay.
We can talk about it.
Do you want us to take a stab at the inventory process?
I would say, I would have no problem with that. That'd be good, that's a good start. And then Laura, get your, whatever's in the attic up there.
And then if there's these reports that you have in a file?
He's lying.
We could show you whatever we got.
I
Give
know
you
at some
everything.
point in time, they gave us reports via email.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I mean, when we talk about even board action, someone's gonna have to go through the vault of the minutes from 2008 and look for that board action. You know, that's not, even, and here's my concern is even with an auditor is, the auditor is gonna come in and probably say some of the questions that you're asking, hey, I need the board minutes from 2008, we're gonna have to go and find.
I have those on CD already,
Okay.
from 2006 till
Yes, Dan.
approximately mid-09.
In the board, isn't there an easier way to at least assemble all of the dispersed checks, assuming that all the checks were photocopied anyway? Can't we get a set of 3 years' worth of disbursements, you know, from the bank that
Tim, is
published
that
all the
something we can
checks?
pull off?
No, we don't need to, we have the check receipt and all the documents in banker's boxes.
How about we do this?
Yeah,
We'll-
well,
the fin-
I'm just saying that they're all
Fine.
photocopied already. We don't
No, these are
No,
all
no,
originals.
They're the
It's originals.
Finance committee, a finance advisory committee will meet, we'll make an assessment, and from that, we'll come and advise the
enough.
board whether.
Okay.
it's-
We'll bring you some black and
Sounds
white
good, John.
pictures of the boxes.
Okay.
to show you
I
the size.
still would like to see the one thing, because you got a report from Ridgewood, you were gonna, somebody was gonna see, I'll do the Freedom Information request myself if you want, like York, Sandberg, see what kind of report they did. to
Tim,
see
were you
if-
able to get a hold of, I talked to one firm.
I talked to Sandberg, he said they really didn't prepare any reports for the board. They reported every month on change orders, and that was really all there was. When I was in South Berwin, we did 2 construction projects. We built 2 buildings, and the reports were very similar to this.
So the only thing I want, the reason I pushed you to do that is, I don't want people misconception that we did something that was less adequate
Right.
than what other school, whether you agree or disagree with what it is, because I heard the comparison made by one person to what ComEd does or the CTA does on a $5 million federal grant program. I mean, it's about as far of apples and oranges you could ever consider. So I think the other important message is, if every other school did kind of what we did, okay, fine, people want to look into it, go look into it, but, you know, nobody, in essence, did anything wrong, which is
I can
kind of the way
I can
it's
make
coming
sure that
across.
the example of the report that I have in my notes, I can show that to the finance advisory.
I appreciate that, Kevin.
Okay, so that, you'll look at the next finance committee, you'll be talking about that.
Yeah, so we want them to report back to the board when
Yes.
at the committee of the whole?
Yeah, they can do that.
Okay, so that'll be at the end of November.
Do we have a consensus that our current staff should not be spending time on this or not?
I agree.
That's for John Shuck. So that's a majority of the board
You should.
members. There's a
Or
consensus
do you abstain?
that we aren't going to spend our current staff's or administration's time on this project.
I don't think we did before either.
Well, Mary Ann spent 4 hours scanning documents. That's our
Which we
current
stopped right
staff.
away. Which we stopped right away.
Okay.
All right, next one is,
Wait, one last
I
thing,
have one
Kevin.
last question.
yes.
To Dr. Stankus. Going back to the pool ventilation,
Yes.
assuming it was, I mean, it was pretty darn uncomfortable for 7 or 8 weeks there, and I'm glad it's all fixed, but did they rectify the situation with exactly the same standards that they used in the original design, or did they actually improve on it so we don't anticipate this happening again?
Well, Dr. Keenan and I both were up on the roof.
Which they
Two
won't let me,
doctors.
they won't let me on the
Okay.
table.
We didn't fall through.
Yeah, but if you fell through, Dr. Key could have helped you.
That's right.
You couldn't have
Well,
helped
that's a vote of
him.
confidence.
We're gonna do a couple things. Our service, our monthly service is gonna be bumped up instead of 60 to 90 days, every 30 days, just to make sure we're keeping everything running correctly. We're looking at adding a larger pulley to minimize the vibration of the fan,
In the RPM.
so that it's not vibrating as much.
So they're
But it's
design
still pulling
improvements.
enough. Minimal. From the most part, the design is very similar. But they put some extra, I don't know
Shock
how I would say
absorbers.
that. Shock absorbers, plus they did some bracketings to try to make sure that the thing wasn't moving in place.
So it's an improvement over the original
And
design.
Dr. Keenan and I also went to the maintenance area and looked at the old fan to see like where,
How bad was it?
Well, that's, I mean, it's sort of the support is what failed, it really wasn't the.
Because it was shattering out.
it was
Because the vibration was breaking up.
But the question is, we still really don't know why it happened.
Yeah, but I thought it was, if I look at the report that I saw coming back in, was that the vibrations cracked that housing. It wasn't absorbing the vibrations
So it was fatigue damage,
properly. You know, it's-
so we can
well, that's why we're looking at a
That's what
larger
it says in the
pulley.
report.
I think was one of the things they
Everyone else
talked
is
about.
larger
And to make
boards
sure
and
that
stuff,
thing's balanced, to
Right.
minimize
Yeah.
vibration.
Right.
So maybe it wasn't properly balanced initially. We can only guess. All we can do is try to prevent it from happening again.
Okay.